This is the story of Paul Bunyan. And no, I'm not talking about the Goliath-sized cartoon character with his pet oxen by his side. I'm talking about the tall and lanky, real-life, French-Canadian Paul Bunyan named Joe Fournier, who had 2 sets of teeth and was not afraid to use them. Raised in Quebec, after the Civil War, Joe moved to Saginaw, Michigan. Quickly he made a name for himself as the best timber feller in Saginaw County, which in those days extended from Saginaw all the way up to Mackinac. Joe's fellow loggers were stunned at the size of his hands, saying his thumbs were as long as the other fingers and he could handle an axe like a matchstick. It was rumored that Joe could cut down trees with one swing of the axe. Late 19th century lumber barons hired armies of men to harness the dense Michigan forests, fittingly nicknamed Green Gold. The armies of men, which included Joe, who were known as timber beasts, would descend on the secluded and dense forest every winter and set up camps devoted to cutting down trees. These men came from all over the globe, Canada, Germany, Sweden, and Finland to name a few places. In the springtime, the logs would be transported to the banks of many Michigan rivers and rolled down the bluffs such as this one, which is now my backyard. Once the logs were in the river, the timber beasts became river hogs and would help drive the lumber to the mills by untangling log jams as the logs moved downstream, all the while trying to avoid falling in the river and drowning. Life in Joe Fournier's timber camp was strictly business. Joe himself was quoted as saying, "No fighting on the river, no drinking on the river, and to bed at 9 o'clock." His men obeyed his orders out of respect and a healthy amount of fear. Throughout the winter and spring, the men would wake up at daylight and chop trees, day after day and month after month, clearing forests all the way to the tip of the lower peninsula. However, once the log drive was over, life for lumberjacks, and specifically Joe Fournier, became anything but strictly business. And that's where Joe's story becomes really interesting. Every May, river towns like Bay City would brace for the inevitable Red Sash Brigade of timber boys descending on their town. Locals would clear out of Hell's Half Mile in the downtown area to avoid the drinking, fighting, and gambling the lumberjacks partook in after every lumber harvesting season. And that's where we find Joe Fournier in 1875. It was said that nobody was brave enough to gamble against Joe or fight Joe. He quickly established himself as the toughest lumberjack around by doing tricks such as biting chunks out of a wooden bar with his double-rowed set of teeth, or fighting anyone who was brave enough or stupid enough to challenge him. On a cold November night, Joe hopped off a steamer at Hawkins and Company's 3rd Street dock in Bay City. Asked by someone nearby where he was going, Joe simply replied, "To hell." As if on command, seconds later a shadowy figure emerged, wielding a mallet, and approached Joe and quickly brought the mallet down on his head. The assassin took off running, while bystanders approached Joe only to discover that he had died. The main murder suspect was Adolphus Robertson. Nicknamed Blinky, Robertson was a stonemason and longtime rival of Joe's. He also happened to be aboard the steamer that brought Joe to Bay City that night. For weeks, the police searched the surrounding area for Robertson without any luck. Just before they gave up the search, they were tipped that somebody matching Blinky's description was spotted at a residence on the 2nd floor of the Hovey block in the city of Saginaw. The officers in charge of the case rushed to the location and arrested Blinky just as he was getting out of bed and attempting an escape out of his bedroom window. He was quickly arrested and brought back to Bay City for his trial. The case was seen as a formality, since everyone believed that Robertson had murdered Joe Fournier that night. However, after days of arguments, the defendant's attorney began to cast doubts about the witnesses' descriptions of events. Did they actually see the murder take place? If they did, were they sure Blinky Robertson was the murderer? It was dark, after all. These questions proved to be enough for the jury, as they declared the defendant not guilty, and the case against Joe Fournier went unsolved and remains a mystery. Little did Blinky Robertson know, however, that walking free with him from the courthouse on that date was another person, or rather the story of a person that quickly transformed into a myth and a legend. In the years and decades that followed, the legend of Paul Bunyan was born. He stood 7 feet tall and roamed the wilderness with an axe in one hand and an oxen walking alongside him. Some say he was born in the northern Michigan wilderness, others say Minnesota, even others say Wisconsin. Whatever the truth may be, immigrant lumberjacks like Fournier went into the wilderness of this region in search of lumber and the American dream, and came out of that same wilderness with a little more money than before, sore muscles, and perhaps most importantly, stories and legends that would survive the ages and help describe the lives of these brave and daring men.